Oh, okay,
heritage
nice.
or something like indigenous knowledge, something like that.
Hmm.
Probably will be good.
Gue lupa soalnya lu taruh di mana.
I don't know. I don't know. Is it the colonial buzzword
The
or
colon initiative that's centered non-mainstream,
yeah, the centered
non-main
mainstream?
decenter mainstream streams of knowledge.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Probably yeah. Something like that. Wait. Orient and the Occident. I mean, like
Okay.
something like that lah. Something like that lah.
Centered, that centered indigenous knowledge. Should I use leftist?
Ah,
Okay. I think we're gonna start in the next 5 minutes. Like there's 2 minutes left, but I want to give people some time for them to enter the Zoom.
okay. I'm cool.
It's so sad that our names got cut off. This is,
Yeah, yeah.
naming.
Um, last
No,
bar.
it's okay. It's okay. I'm kidding.
Ah, good.
Oh no. Oh, that's good. That's perfect, actually. Mhm. Oh, oops. Makasih, Tin.
Probably I will stutter during the presentation about um the the tables.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of packed, so
I think we'll be good.
wish I wish me luck.
I will. I am wishing. I'm wishing you luck. It's actually very interesting, the type of research she does on the divination tables.
Yeah,
I'm very like, wow, when I heard about your research. That's why I'm like, you have to be part of, you have to be, you have to be guests on deconstructing Indonesia. So we're
yeah.
probably gonna see him a lot more, guys.
Oh
He's
no 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 no.
he's our in-house Islamic history expert.
Yeah, no, no, not that expert, yo.
as as well as Islamic manuscripts. He knows more than me. I'm more contemporary in terms of my Islamic studies field. I'm a lot more contemporary than Auf.
My Islamic studies like half half
No,
half
you're really good.
half. What is half half like?
No, you're really good.
um,
It's 8. Do you think we should wait until like 5 more minutes
yeah, cool.
to let people in inside the Zoom? By the way, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I know it's super, I mean, for those who are in the American time zones, it's probably, just 8 p.m., but the our Indonesian friends and fellows, it's 8 in the morning. So I'm very, very glad that there are some Indonesians so far that I can see. So on a Friday too. I'm very impressed, guys. Jumat apa namanya? Jumat berkah gitu ya. Pagi-pagi ngomongin Islam and indigeneity.
Very barakah.
Jum'ah Mubarak. Jum'ah Mubarak. Jum'ah Mubarak, as they say here.
Oh,
I was gonna translate it to English, but that's gonna be Good Friday, and that's That's a whole other context.
That's the whole context. That's a whole different
Yeah,
context.
that's a whole different context about that. Indigenat. Also, pardon me, I keep on messing up the pronunciation for indigenous, dang, indigeneity. How do you say it?
In indigeneity, like nay or nay, I
Am
don't
I
know.
saying it correctly? Am I saying it correctly?
Yeah.
Indigeneity. I feel like I'm saying it in an Indonesian way instead of the proper
Yeah,
way
yeah,
to
we should
say it.
speak it in Indonesian way.
Are we decolonizing?
Yeah, we are decolonizing
Indigeneity, Itin says.
indigeneity. Yeah, naity, like it's Google though, but
Yeah, so I'm indigeneity. Indigeneity.
cool.
Indigeneity. What? Indigeneity. This is very indigeneity. Okay. Indigeneity. Also, I have to give a bit of a preface. I'm at my family's house and we have little kids running around. So if there is a little kid babbling away in the background, I apologize for everyone. It is the way it is. Indigeneity.
They should join the
Indi-
class.
Indigenitas. Indigeneity. Indigeneity? Indigeneity. It's okay. Accents are cool. Accents are hot. That's fine. Oh, there's already 20 people. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome, everyone. There's 21 people wanting to talk about Islam and indigeneity. Am I saying it correctly now? Yes, indigeneity. We're gonna start at like 8:05 for those of you who have joined so that we can give people a bit of time to join in, especially because it's in the morning at Indonesia. So we're just gonna wait for a little bit. Should we start? What do you think? Auf? Okay. 8:05 now? Should we start? Oh, people keep trickling in though. Like 6 people trickle in at the last minute.
Yeah, maybe you can start it now.
Should I start now? Or should I
Yeah.
wait until 30 people came in? It's 26 now. Okay. Derek just texted me saying that I should start. So, hi everybody. Welcome to our first class of Deconstructing Indonesia in 2026. Confetti, confetti. I'm so excited for this. And first of all, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's for those who celebrate it. And because this is our first ever clash of 2026, we thought that it should be very interesting if we invited a very special guest to be a part of our Islam and indigeneity class in this model of indigenous people. So please welcome Auf Abdurrahman Said. Am I saying your name correctly? And he's from Coretanist, which is a decolonial initiative that centered in indigenous knowledge. And one of their aims is to actually give an alternative streams of knowledge in mainstream media to tell people about what type of knowledge that has been forgotten, specifically manuscript work. So Alf has very kindly agreed to join us and to talk about his research on divination tables from Bugis and Malay. And I was thinking about it would be very interesting to contrast his research about what we know about indigeneity and Islam. So, next slide. Oh, sorry, I also forgot to introduce myself. I totally forgot about that part. So, hi everybody. My name is Alsya. Um, I'm also one of the main one of the core teams of Deconstructing Indonesia. I did my bachelor's in Arabic Studies at Universitas Indonesia, and I just recently graduated from Columbia University and I got an MA in Islamic Studies. So those are my qualification. Auf qualifications himself is he did Islamic history and he did a lot of work in manuscript philology. He's our philology guy. That's what I like to say. So let's start. One of the big important question that we like to think about when we made the indigenous model is that why is it important to discuss Islam when we talk about indigeneity? By the way, like whenever I speak indigeneity, I can't pronounce it properly, but it's okay. We're decolonizing knowledge. We don't need to have perfect American English accents every time. So I apologize if I do have an imperfect accent. So there's lately been a bit of a discourse, even when we posted about this class, about Islamization and about syncretism in Islam, about how do you blend indigenous knowledge with Islam, because whenever we like it or not, there's about what 89 or 90% of Indonesians are Muslims. Indonesia is the biggest Muslim populous country in the whole world. So Islam has been there since it arrived in the 7th century in Indonesia and has grown so far throughout the till the modern era. So whenever we talked about indigeneity and whenever we talked about Indonesia and Islam in relation to one another, there's always a type of language that is used, and the language would be about domination, subjugation, purification. And whenever I hear those buzzwords, one of the first thing that came to my mind is that it's a very colonial framework. It's a very colonial lens, right? When you talked about how Islam dominate indigenous people, how Islam subjugate indigenous people, how it purify indigenous people. But what we have to keep in mind is that these languages centered indigenous people as passive recipients to all of this foreign external influence, right? Where when we've discussed this on Ethan's classes and Nathaniel's classes before, and all of our guest speakers, indigenous people aren't passive at all. They're actually very active. And there's always a constant negotiation, a constant flux of what it is to be indigenous, right? So this type of categorization and this type of language, when we use, there's a very big danger in actually using this type of language. Like being very rigid in what you think of what is Islam and what is indigenous can have a very harmful impact. Because at the end of the day, we don't exist in a vacuum, right? Even in the past and even now, we exist, ideas and human beings and societies exist coexist with each other. So I'm always very wary if there's certain type of language that are being pushed when we talked about certain things, certain categories that are being imposed. Because at the end of the day, there's always an underlying systems of power that can and will benefit from the usage of these categories and these languages, right? So if that's why I think it's important to discuss Islam and indigeneity, because it's always a big topic nowadays. And whenever we talked about both Indigeneity and Islam, we cannot talk about Orientalism. So let me just give you a brief rundown of what Orientalism is for those of you who are not in the social humanities field. Next slide, please. So, Orientalism, what it is. Orientalism is a book that was published in 1978 by Edward Said. He's a Palestinian American, and he is one of the biggest thinkers in the post-colonial field, him and Spivak. Spivak is the one who wrote about Can the Subaltern Speak? I'm not gonna talk about Spivak, sorry. I really liked her, so it pops into my mind. But whenever we talked about Edward Said and Orientalism, we talked about how he was able to conceptualize the self and the other. The self in this instance represent the Occident or the West that is always constructed as being very rational, very developed, very superior, while the other, on the other hand, represent the Orient or the East, portrayed as irrational, stagnant, exotic. This binary framework is a very artificial and power-based discourse that is used to justify Western domination. Like in Orientalism, it consists of three parts, like the book itself. And at first, it traces the first 4,000 years of history of cultural and historical encounters between Europe and Asia. And then he talks about the scientific discipline that produced the specialist knowledge in the so-called Oriental languages and culture from the early 19th century. And then these scientific discipline is, of course, is by the West, right? By the Occident. And then the last part, he talks about the long-term images, stereotypes, and also the general ideology of what is the Orient and what is the other that is constructed by this generation of Western scholars that we talked about before. And Orientalism itself depends on a culturally constructed identity, a culturally constructed distinction between the Orient and the other. Like, how do you define the self? You define the self by what it is not, right? What it is not, as in what it is the other. As one of his quotes that I put on here is that Orientalism must create its own other because of this other it can strengthen its own identity and superiority. And because of this, the other can set off against the Orient as a sort of a surrogate and even an underground self. And one of the most interesting part is what seemed to have influenced Orientalism the most is this fairly constant sense of confrontation. So whenever we talked about the Orient and the other, it's always more of a fact, it's always less of a nature than it is an inherent nature than it is an imaginative geography. Why I use the word imaginative? Because the title of the course is Reimagining Indigeneity and Islam, right? So like we wanted to talk about what is going on right now and then like to see if we can reimagine it, right? And also Orientalism is also inescapably always politic. It's very political. There's no way it's not political. And maybe to help people to actually like think about Orientalism and how it can manifest itself in popular media, I give this example of, next slide, please. One of the examples that I thought would be interesting and people would generally know about is Aladdin. Aladdin, everybody knows it. Disney animated movie came out in 1992, and even from the opening song, right? I came from a land from a faraway place where the caravan camels roam, where it's flat, immense, and the heat instant. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home. There's always like this type of narrative that the other, or the East in the sense, is barbaric, savages. There's also it's not even an undertone at this point. It's a very explicit racist portrayals of the other in this sense. Like if you if you look at the movie, Aladdin, Jasmine, and the Sultan, all of these good characters, right? I love Aladdin's song. It's a growing up childhood folktale. Yes, I forgot the tone, but like the Arabian Night. We all know this song, right? We all know this song. But if you notice, all of the good characters in the movie have American accents. While all of the bad characters, just as Jafar or like one of those what do you call them? Like the people that is protecting the Sultan, but is also under Jafar's pocket. All of them are portrayed with a very Arabic kind of sounding Vizier, yes, he's a vizier. Arabic sounding accent. Oops. Arabic sounds an accent that sounds evil, as well as they would be have very distinct how to say hook noses, while all of Aladdin and Jasmine and even the Sultan looks very friendly. Looks very friendly and kind of looks almost even their skin tone looks whiter than Jafar and all of the evil characters, right? So those are just very two very small example of how Orientalism can manifests itself in popular media. And even I think like the eve of why, yes, Indiana Jones, about how it's always been as if the savages, the barbaric, we came to liberate, we came to help educate you from this filthy, filthy place, right? And like we also cannot like ignore the fact that in 1992 it's also the eve of the invasion of what was the invasion of America in 1992? I suddenly forgot. It was the Iraq invasion or the Afghanistan invasion. One of the two. And I think it was in one of the interviews of Aladdin where it's very much it's a propaganda. It tried to kind of make it palatable that there is a war being fought in the Middle East under the name of the America as a state, right? I I truly forgot. Like what was the war in 1992, guys? It's Iraq. Sorry, I was Afghanistan. No, it was Iraq. It was Iraq, yes. So like it's Orientalism is so much political. It cannot not be political. It's always political, right? What's interesting though, when we talk about in the context of Indonesia, can you give me this next slide, please, Alf? Is that when we talked about the discourse of the West versus the East, the Orient versus the Occident, Indonesia doesn't enter this discourse. It's not part of it. We're very much not a part of this discourse when we talked about this. Like the Oriental, but at the same time, colonial minds that invade and colonize Indonesia, the Dutch, have this type of mindset, this Orientalist mindset in their heads when they not invade, sorry, when they colonize Indonesia. So Edward Said in chapter 1 says that Orientalism it carries within it the stamp of a problematic European attitude towards Islam. So I need everyone to keep this in mind when we talked about Indonesia and when all of these colonial authors, either from Dutch, German, Portuguese, Spanish, right? When all of them talked about Indonesia, all of them has a very specific framework when they think about Indonesia and specific about Islam in Indonesia. So this is where I give the floor to Alf, who would talk more about how the colonial mindset think about indigeneity as well as Islam during this era.
Yeah, thank you, Alsya, for the time, yeah, and the explanation about yeah. So during the discourse, okay, like in the around 19th century, the discourse, the Orientalist discourse, Indonesia or Southeast Asia for more general is not it's not included in the discourse, but since the claw of colonialist regime have been here, so they try to fit Southeast Asia with their own framework, like based on their Western canon. Okay, so before um yeah, before we go further, first I want to introduce again myself. Yeah, I am Auf, and I have a BA in Islamic history, and yeah, so my training mostly in history, and yeah, I got into philology or manuscript studies, yeah, for like the last 2 years. So this will be brought to my own research in about divination, yeah, about divination scripts, mostly tables. So before we step into the cases, it's uh it's probably better if we discuss more how Orientalist imagination, how they imagine Indigeneity in the Malay world. So first we have Richard Winstead. This guy is very famous in Malay studies since he contributed a lot to the way we understand Malay history because he collect a lot of manuscript and record stuffs, you know. But here in the Malays cultural history he wrote in 1947, which is his masterpiece. We can find that he have this theory. It's mostly similar with how how people in the West, I mean how Orientalists think about Middle East. So he have this theory which is layer cake. And in this layer cake theory, he put animism, you know, animism as the real indigenous. So and the fact that people nowadays still think in this, you know, mindset, it 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 reflects how Orientalist ideas still, you know, still prevail in this time and age. So animism, quote unquote, the real folk beliefs at the bottom, and we got Hindu Buddhism who really which um influence animism a lot, you know. It changed it, it shaped it to the way we understand right now. And then we got Islam, which is a foreign veneer, a thin shell, a thin foreign shell on the top. So yeah, it's kind of problematic since it perceive indigenous as something that could be easily erased and altered by foreign influence, as if indigenous minds or indigeneity in this context is not the same culture as we understand Islam or any other you know, any other belief. So they're fragile and then static and then easily erased by. And then we got Snokhorohronya. This is pretty much famous, I thought, in Indonesia, since when we talk about Orientalists, we talk about anthropologists, we all say Hronya. Yeah. Hronya has his book. One of the most one of the most famous one is Acehnese. Yeah, the Acehnese. So in the Acehnese, yeah, he's a Dutch, by the way. In the last chapter of his book, The Future of Islam, he stated rigorously about how indigeneity, like indigenous people, has been syncretized. So syncretism here is a very problematic word if we refer to recent studies. Uh, it 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 put indigenous culture, ideas, and, you know, beliefs as if it's yeah, most likely the same like Winstead static, but in this sense they become amalgamation, you know. So this is foreign influence, and we got indigeneity, and both like it's either become the new one, the mixed religion, or it's like fused with Islam, so it's become some kind of um texture in Islam. So it has no its own identity just because it doesn't have, you know, very organized type of religion in Abrahamic one that we understand. So yeah, that's about Huronya. So Huronya here is actually like, yeah, I talk about film like Avatar. He probably like Jake Sully, you know, in the sense, but he doesn't really, you know. So people sometimes they like think, is is it true? Huronya just, you know, he just manipulate Aceh to just to understand them, and then, you know, um take over their land, or he sincerely he sincerely admitted to Islam and Aceh values and teachings, something like that. And then we got Wilkinson. um Wilkinson, in his book Malay Beliefs, he talked about animism as a primitive way of life. So it's overlaid, mostly the same with the way Winstead frame it. But since Wilkinson is a researcher of divination and talisman, and then amulets, so yeah, they think of this kind of knowledge as superstitious, and it doesn't fit in with the way modern society should be lived. And then we got Walter Skeet, also in magic. He talks about these ritual spirits and healing practices as survivals or residue, like remains of the pre-regional age. So he frees Malay cosmology, into static world, when in reality, um cosmology in the Malay world, in Nusantara, it's actually not superstition in Abrahamic way. It's mostly more like temporal ethics. So it governs the way we schedule our activity and such. It's mostly like asking why people work 9 to 5. Is there any logical explanation about it? Like, why start in 9? Why 9? No, actually, there's no any sense of logic in there. But yeah, the difference is the way Malay people in the past, frame time as sacred, as divine power of nature. But the point is, it's all about temporal ethics. Okay, and then we got Maxwell. Yeah, mostly the same. It talks about cosmology as psychological disorder. Yeah. Um. So in his contemporaries, we can call it Maxwell racist for his time. In his time's standard. So yeah, we can conclude that Orientalists imagine indigeneity as a static and then irrational residue of animism, the remain of the forgotten past. And then on the other hand, Islam here appeared as a superficial, as artificial rain veneer. Okay, and then we will talk about Muhammad Taib Usman, Tun Muhammad Taib Usman, one of the great thinkers in Malay studies. Yeah, um, the leading expert. So, to reclaim this indigenous mind, in his book Malay Folk Beliefs, published in 1809, which is actually um, the revision based on his PhD thesis about indigenous Hindu and Islamic um, conversation, dialogue in Malay folk beliefs. So, yeah, he decisively broke Orientalist and colonial lens, stating that indigeneity as a dynamic, adaptive system and constantly responding to new moral vocabularies. So he argued that what so whatsoever there is no such thing as we understand here, syncretization or Islamization in Orientalist type of thinking, that could be understand indigeneity as static, passive recipient of foreign influence. What he meant by that, um there is constant renegotiation. So there is an intense conversation, dialogue between cultures. So while we understand indigenous has been erased easily, for him it's not that simple. If we look into evidence, we dive into manuscript and oral histories, cultures and material cultures, we can see here that indigenous resisting, and it's only adapting to Islam for its new moral vocabularies and quote unquote um conceptual grammars. Yeah. So yeah, this is the example. What we understand about natural spirits is only we sorry, I won't use first person here. So indigenous mind, indigenous culture only adapt the vocabulary and grammar the way we understand the concept, but but the whole idea of jinn in Indonesia is different from from Middle East. So jinn in the Middle East, or yeah, what what the Orientalists think when they say Islam, Islam originated from. Jinn is the other world entity. Yeah, that's correct. But here, the way we understand jinn is not pretty much otherworldly. So in the indigenous people always frame jinn as some kind of inhabitant of certain land masses. For example, when we want to hike um into a mountain, we will say like be be respectful to certain like trees or other natural spirits. Here we call it jinn. So even though the term, the terminology um pretty much change or shifted to a more Islamic word, but the real storyteller here is still indigenous mind. So it goes the same with how we understand luck. Even though we call it sustenance or rezeki, the way we understand luck is pretty much the same with tua. And then the communal rights is mostly, we call it silaturahim, but we still use it, but we still practice the right to this day. Um so yeah, now we step into yeah. So here, to make it bite-sized understanding. So we can conclude that in Ottoman anthropology, Islam become the new conceptual grammar, but indigenous imagination. Okay, so the way indigenous people imagine the practicality and the concept and etc. The context, it's still the same with the way of our people. So the storyteller is still um indigenous imagination, not foreign ideas whatsoever. So yeah, and this is the reason why ritual from pre-Islamic often endure. They gain new legitimacy through Islamic justification. So what indigenous practices and ideas borrow from Islam mostly is the legitimacy, the conceptual grammar, the medium to understand it in a more concrete, in more concrete way, but it doesn't really reduce it in yeah, in culture context. So yeah, now we talk about the case. So here we got calendar, or here deity calendar. So yeah, for Farooq Yahya in his book, he talked that there is huge um yeah, huge probability that the our indigenous um understanding of time. So the earliest calendar calendrical system is 5 days. So so um we divide week in 5 days, not like we understand right now, seven. And this calendar system is what was widely used across societies as divinatory technique. So time was and is always sacred in indigenous imagination, and it was used for numerology, knowledge to determine which is auspicious and which is inauspicious. And it has a lot of terms in different societies. Malay call it ketika lima, and then Bugis people call it kutika bilang lima, and then we got Batak people call it permamis, and Javanese as pasaran or market days. Yeah, this is the example here we got from Palembang, which will be elaborated in the next slide. Yeah. So here one of the earliest ketika lima that still survive today is from 1775, probably from Selangor. Yeah, before we jump into the elaboration of both tables, I want to ask, is there anyone could find the difference or what they understand about these two things? Maybe. I will look to the chat. Okay, yeah. So yeah, ketika lima is yeah, it's more earlier compared to saat lima. So as we can see here, so as we all understand, Hindu Buddhism influence come earlier than Islamic. So the way indigenous people in the past, they frame their time in such divine way. They see it as they have this calendar or divination table called Ketika Lima. Ketika comes from Sanskrit word mean time, or we call it waktu right now, time. So it's time of five. So it divides a day into five time. And then after Islam came, it become Saat Lima, which Saat is an Arabic word which mean time also. So uh, as we can see here, the difference between both two tables, both two, calendrical system is mostly um not contextual, but more into, moral vocabulary, or what we understand just now as conceptual grammar. And is it really erased the way indigenous people believe on time as divine power? We'll see on the next slide. Yeah, so here.
Sorry for the
So
interruption, but can you like so that the people can see it was the taskbar kind of makes it so that they can't see the dates of the
yeah, yeah.
ketika lima and saat lima. Sorry for interruption, Alf.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Is it? Yeah, so people can see right now. Yeah, from both. Okay. Yeah. So in the left is ketika lima, and then in the right is saat lima. Saat lima is the one that already infused by or influenced by Islamic tradition, which ketika lima is more Indic one. Yeah. So here's the how to say it. Yeah, the explanation of both elements. Like we just see colors, right? And Malay Arabic script. And here's the Romanized. So they divide times as how we understand right now, right? We always see a day in five times. We got morning for noon, and then afternoon, and then evening. And the way they understand each time in a day, in different day, it always have gods, have deity as its own incarnation of the day. So they always how to say this, like always have God as who as the as the representation of what good thing and what bad thing will come to them in each times. And yeah, as we can see, this is pretty much beautiful. Yeah, it has its own pattern, mostly yeah, diagonal. But the arrival of Islamic influence is not really change the way they believe, you know. As we can see here in the morning, day 5, in Ketika Lima, they have Kala. Kala is Shiva, the god of destruction. And then the Islamic one only change it into Israel, which um the angel of death. So both have this, you know, destruction power, and it has the same meaning of what the day could be. And then we got Brahma alternate into Ibrahim, which for Yahya Farouk, there's no relevant difference between what makes Brahma uh alternated into Ibrahim is mostly because it has the same it's almost have the same, you know, the way we pronounce it, like Braham. And then yeah, mostly the same, nothing much different. And we can see the explanation of each deity here. Okay, so Maswara represent luck for approaching rulers and to make arrangement and things. Maswara is Maheswara in Hinduism. And then we get Vishnu, it's favorable for maintenance, Brahma for beginnings, for construction, initiating actions, something like that. And then Sri is auspicious, it's luck, it's lucky for doing agriculture and household affairs, which is goddess Sri is actually Ba. And then Kala or Shiva is inauspicious, illness, conflict, false good news, and something like that. And it's pretty much the same as we see here. As Israel is associated with disaster, death, failure, and other things. So from these divination tables, we can learn new things, which is um the arrival of the arrival of Islamic influence is not really erased or subjugated indigenous minds as Orientalists understand about it. Um, so the active actor here is indigeneity. So indigeneity thriving and try to, you know, they 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 are dynamic, and we can see their dynamics through this how they adopt Islamic concept here. So it's not the other way around. It's not like we got influence from Arabia or North Africa come to Indonesia or Nusantara, yeah, and we just accept it without any, you know, filtration or you know, we just accept it without any consideration or whatsoever, as um colonialists or orientalists understand that Islam here is the come for erasure. No, it's a constant dialogue and renegotiation. So the storyteller, the idea of time as divine is mostly indigenous. They only adopt the terms and, you know, the so Islam and Hinduism in this context helping indigenous to you know to institutionalize, to make it more um yeah, more organized in understanding of time, in the understanding of time. So yeah, that's it. And why I always say indigenous, not Malay, because this type of thinking is actually still used in today's world. And if we go to like South Sulawesi, in like in Bugis countryside, like Bone, um they still, there are a lot of old people still using tables to determine in auspicious and auspicious day, to determine luck and unlucky days. Yeah. And as we can see here, pretty much not different between ketika lima and kutika bilang lima in the Bugis world. And this type of divination use widespread in the region. It reflects how this thinking framework is already exists long before Hindu Buddhism come to the region even. And both foreign influence, it's institutionalized them, not really altered the way of thinking about time as sacred element. And here then the second case is like the forthcoming of planetary calendar. So it marked the arrival of cosmology in astronomical sense. But even though planetary calendar exists, the physical evidence after the arrival of Islam. But as we can see here, Fleet argued that planetary days were in use in Southeast Asia since 7th or 8th centuries in inscriptions from Champa in Burma, and then Java. Sorry. No, Champa in Cambodia, and then Java and yeah, and Cambodia. Yeah. And it's called Ketika Tujuh. So we got a little bit shift here from dividing week into 5 days into 7 days. But still, yeah, even though the way we understand how much, so when we talk about numbers, it's alternated. But the way we understand each day, it's still preserved the way indigenous mind understand their time as a secret power there. And yeah, from deities as the representation of time, we got now planets. So there are 7 planets of of uh yeah, they call it tujuh bintang, 7 celestial things. Yeah, first we got sun or shams or matahari, and then moon kamar or moon, Mars marikh, Mercury utarit, and then Jupiter mushtari, Venus zuhroh, and then Saturn zuhal. This naming of planets mostly influenced by sophistic tradition of Ibn Arabi from yeah from the Middle East. But the way we understand each planet as as the inhabitant of days of times in a day is pretty much the same as several as previous table. Okay, we'll jump back first to previous table here. Okay, I want you guys to look it carefully. So yeah, I put it in color so we can understand that. Okay, the way this table works, for example, we take Maswara, right? The first day in the morning is Maswara. So in the second day, Maswara will be inhabit the forenoon. So it's the way it works is mostly the way we understand how sun is rotating, rotating in human eyes. So, and then Maswara will come to um, noon in the third day, and so on. So the pattern here is, yeah, it's skipped by one time in each day. So yeah, the pattern is mostly, um, yeah, as I said before, diagonal. And then the planet, the way we understand planetary calendar or ketika tujuh here, okay, I will, yeah, I put both the divination which used in to society ketika bilang tujuh and then ketika tujuh in Malay and Bugis, pretty much the same as both has have been influenced by Islamic tradition. But yeah, as we can see here. Okay. So let's see sun. Sun inhabited morning in Sunday. So the sun will come in the next day, which is Tuesday. Okay. The day after tomorrow in forenoon, sun. So the way they understand time as, the way they understand time as something that is inhabited by certain god and replaced to certain planet or certain bintang here, celestial objects. It's pretty much the same. It's skipped by one day, from skipped by one day into skipped by 2 days here. But the pattern here, sun, pretty much diagonal. So when if the idea of indigenous culture, minds, tradition replaced wholly by syncretization is problematic. And if we refer to Type Usman in his book Malay folk religion, Malay folk beliefs, he said that syncretization of Islamic and local ideas must have been an incomplete process. So, is there syncretization? Is syncretism exists? Yeah, but if we say it's like amalgamation, a new type of religion, a fusion between two that has been, completed, it's problematic because we see indigenous belief as a monolith, as a static belief that can be erased and it cannot develop time by time. The fact that there's nothing like um you know two thing fusion and then become the new one. No, it's two thing that keep in constant dialogue each time till today. It's still in dialogue and it's not like altered into another being, another concept, new concept. No, the old concept is still exists and it's always negotiating. mm, yeah, there's always negotiation and reinterpretation, but the core concept is still there. So it's not a new thing. Calling indigenous um ideas as a syncretized product is the same we call it it's um extinct, it's altered, it's impure, it's not pure anymore. No, every culture needs a dialogue with other culture, so it's not like forced. No, so Islam come not by sword, right? As we know, Islam and Hinduism come to Indonesia as a culture that was brought together with its own um local local knowledge too. I mean, Islam come to Indonesia with Sufism, which Sufism is mostly rooted to the way indigenous people in Middle East. If we look back, if we refer to Muqaddimah Ibn Khaldun, indigenous belief in Arab, in Bedouin people still exists in the way Islam people practice it. So the the narrative of pure and impure is most comes to Indonesia as like late in the last century after Wahhabism like dominate Arabia, and then most Islamic scholars in Indonesia they go for Hajj and come to Indonesia and say this type of practice is blasphemy, mushrik, or superstitious that should be abandoned by us, civil people. So no, the way we imagine Islam right now and the way people in the past imagine Islam is very different. So um, why we always say that Islam erased this culture, because the way we understand Islam in modern sense is as a either pure or expansionist idea. So the way we think is actually the same with colonial or Orientalist framework on how they want us to think about foreign ideas and local ideas interact. The interaction is not one way, it's two ways. Both can influence each other. And if there is an influence, it's not necessarily mean it's a new product. No, it's not a mixed religion. So reinterpretations here is not totally displaced the indigenous notions of the supernatural or ways of dealing with them. So we deal with our own belief. Belief mean here is supernatural ways, right? um is more indigenous, practically Islam, but the core idea of the whole supernatural, or yeah, the way we like we have adat, right? Like this adat is at its core still indigenous. Even though it has a lot of influence, it doesn't necessarily mean replaced or displaced. So yeah, that's it. Sorry if I got stuttering at the end of discussion. So after this,
No, amazing.
we got we got Alsya to continue the whole discussion.
Okay, so I think it would be beneficial for both of us to chime in on this slide because if you, from all of the explanation that Ahuf has very kindly provided with manuscript evidence, if you
Yeah.
go to the next slide,
Okay. Wait.
we actually made a little spectrum of what we have been talking about today, right? Because whenever we talked about syncretism, indigeneity, and Islam, it's always as if it's a spectrum that is very rigid, right? There, and we implore you all to think and reimagine this. And on one end would be the indigenous oriented imagination that see indigeneity not as pure anymore due to foreign influence. But as Auf has explained before, this is very, very problematic because it only thinks about indigenous people as very passive recipients, um the victim mentality, so to speak, right? Like, oh my God, I can't do anything. All of this Hindu, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, etc., etc., can't met me, and now I'm not as pure anymore. And on the other end, the whole Islam-oriented imagination that seen Islam has been corrupted by this indigenous belief, and sorry, by local belief or indigenous belief, and it's seen as a purifying force. But what we need to think about is there is a constant negotiation and renegotiation over and over again. And it's not just one way or two way. It's always going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's never like static. It's always dynamic. Like one of the if if I can make like give an example, like one of the biggest example is tahlilan in Indonesia, right? Like tahlilan doesn't tahlilan doesn't exist if you think about it in the terms of what we think about. It's a very much like a very indigenous belief, lo. Tahlilan and ziarah kubur, for example. Because that's the whole thing about Wahhabism, right? They like to destroy the shrines. They don't like that there's Ziyarah Kubur and then there's like, was it called Alf? Waliyatullah. Apa sih namanya?
Yeah.
Wali
Saint.
Waliyatullah and Wali Songo,
Yeah, like
tarekat.
sage.
Like it's yeah, saints. I don't like the word saints. It's a very because we're talking about frameworks. It's whenever we talked about like shrines and saints, it's from a very Christian lens
Yeah,
when
yeah.
in actuality they're not the saints the way we think about saints in English, right?
Yeah, I think more into sage probably.
Sages. It's more about these are the people who help spread Islam in the
Yeah.
region, right? So we try to reimagine this type of relationship between indigeneity and Islam as a constant negotiation, and we did a little spectrum here because it's always going back and forth, back and forth. It's constantly negotiating and renegotiating, always in flux, never static. So, like, why am I putting up my hand? Sorry. So, do you have anything to add on our very, very cool spectrum that we made of?
Yeah, yeah, I think yeah, we both agree, yeah. Um Yeah, so the problem here is the way we understand, like, that's why the title of this discussion is reimaginating. So yeah, the current imagination, the way people understand thinking, or reflecting probably about the relationship between indigeneity and Islam in maritime Southeast Asia, in the Malay world, in Indonesia. There's always um people always go extreme. Like it's always like picking either, um if they pick indigenous oriented imagination, they will be full orientalist. Like, they see indigeneity as not pure anymore. It's been in invaded their ideology or whatsoever with Islam and other great forces.
Hmm.
It's the notion is like there is an effort to erase this, which actually I
Yeah.
understand that in contemporary context, right? There is an attempt to do that, right? I agree with that. And then we go in the extreme right. We see in Islam oriented imagination. So this is the people who want to erase it, right? They see Islam is has this kind of legitimacy from God, to make the world civil, which actually it's the same framework as colonial thinking. And
Yes.
they
Different
want to,
flavors.
yeah, different flavor, but both work the same, yeah, the same playbook.
Very
And
puritanical.
yeah, puritanical. They want, yeah, this purifying force, like what I said to you before. It comes to Indonesia like late, very, very late. It's like in 1900s, in early 1900, or 1800, late 1800, like 1890s. Yeah, this quote unquote reformist, yeah, self-claim reformist movement wants to, make Islam come back to hitbah, right? To how to say this? To the nature of Islam. So they
Mm.
want to they ask people to abandon their animistic belief, which even the calling it animistic is it it makes the discourse of indigeneity is very rigid, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, what we want to negotiate here, what we want to suggest here, or ask people to reimagine is just like Muhammad Taib Osman once, that Islam and indigenous minds, indigenous, uh, folk beliefs, it's a constant negotiation and always in flux. So it's not
Yeah.
like one concrete the other. There, there's no conquest here. There's no like
Yeah.
conquer here. Like, yeah, this is what we want to talk because historically speaking, as what I show to you all in the divination tables, we can see here that it's not always one way influence. They interact each other. Yeah, that is the negotiation. And Islam here comes to reinterpret. So when we call it reinterpretation, doesn't makes it uh impure, right? Or making a new type of other religion. No, it's still the same belief that
It just
in
has other
constant dialogue.
legitimization, other
Yeah,
credibility
yeah.
added on top of
It's
it, right?
yeah, legitimation. So in this spectrum, we try to imagine this communication in kind of not too middle because we don't talk like moderate Islam or what. So
Because
yeah,
I talked about categorization at the very when we opened the session, right?
yeah,
Because if you look at this, both of them are seen as a subject. They try to subjugate the other, to dominate the other, right? One seen as indigenous is like the best thing, Islam is the best thing. The indigenous try to kind of like dominate, like they feel offended that Islam dominated, so it's not as pure, while Islam felt offended that indigenous beliefs like corrupted it, so now it's not as pure anymore. This type of language of purification, dominance, subjugation is colonial language. It's a very much a colonial Orientalist language that is being used when you look at these categories. And I think one thing that would be very interesting when we start our discussion session is if you look at the next slide, I put a quote from Edward Said, and it's from his other book, Cultural and Imperialism. And I think this is very interesting. We are all taught to venerate our nations and to admire our traditions. We are taught to pursue their interests with toughness and in disregard for other societies. A new and, in my opinion, appalling tribalism is fracturing societies, separating peoples, promoting greed, bloody conflict, and uninteresting assertions of minor ethnic or group particularity. Because we would talk like what's interesting about when we talked about moderate Islam, for example, right? It is very much weaponized by Indonesia today as a political agenda. But on the other hand, if you talked about puritanical Wahhabism, it's also being used as a political agenda. There are underlying systems of power that use this categorization for their own benefits. And we, as just ordinary people that try to live our day to day life, are subjugated, to use the colonial terms, we were imposed upon with this categorization, right? How can you be a good Muslim in the Indonesian society? How can you be a good Muslim citizen? You have to be moderate because, as we talked about in Orientalism, if you're too much like the Arabs, you're a bit too barbaric. You're a bit too savage, right? We all heard about it. Islam from the Middle East is like I've mentioned it a
bad
little bit earlier.
Islam.
Yes, it's Islam through with the sword, with the political conquest, with all of the bloody political campaign, while Islam in Indonesia is through peaceful means. It's through tarekat, Sufism, intermarriages. So, of course, the type of Islam that we practice in Indonesia is a civil type of Islam. But I would argue that even the term moderate, because both of us are Muslim, right? Me and Auf are practicing Muslims. If you hear the term moderate, the first thing that comes into my mind is that Islam as a belief in itself is poisonous. Thus, we would have to get it in moderation when we consume it or practice it. If not, it will come poisonous to us. And that type of propaganda very much, because like we have to remember, we don't live in a vacuum. There are geopolitics agenda, geopolitic reasons like another thing with Indonesian people is that whenever we found something that, oh my God, there's a picture of Sukarno photographed with JFK. I didn't know that Sukarno knew JFK. Guys, we don't live in a vacuum. People interact one another, right? Or like whenever I remember there's a letter from the one of the King of England to Kesultanan, what was it? Kesultanan Banten or something, the Banten Sultanate. When we discovered it, everybody was like, "Oh my God, there's actual correspondence between the Sultan of Banten with the ruling king or queen of England. Oh my God, that's so amazing." No, like we don't live in a vacuum. Societies, human ideas, they don't just stand by itself. There's always something going on around us. So if, for example, there's this push towards a moderate type of Islam, that with the echoing buzzwords and type of language that is used in the US imperial propaganda, for example, post 9/11, nor is it the type of language that US used to justify the invasion of Afghanistan. You have to take a step back and actually think about who benefits from this categorization and these languages that are being used, right? Who is the good Muslim, who is the bad Muslim, who benefits from all of this? Because it's certainly not us, ordinary people who just try to live their lives. It's certainly not us who have to like deal with all of this, right? Who benefits from all of this categorization of who is indigenous, who is not indigenous, who is Muslim enough, who is not Muslim enough, who is mushrik and not mushrik. Like, so like to kind of like start our discussion. Can you go to the next slide? To start our discussion is I would like to ask all of you guys in the room right now, like, what are the dangers of putting either idea of indigenous Muslim or like that type of puritanical Islam or like indigenous Islam on a pedestal and not engage with it critically? Remember, we don't live in a vacuum. There's always underlying systems of power that will and can benefit from this categorization. So I would like put it on the floor if anybody has any ideas or any questions or answers or even responses about what we talked about today. Wait, let me check the chat. There was a question before, Alf, when when you were talking from James. Let me try to find it. Where is it?
Yeah, wait, yeah, talking about yeah, living the vacuum, yeah, I agree with the statement. Like, yeah, I mean, this is the way people think about indigeneity. So, as if indigenous people shouldn't, shouldn't get, they shouldn't interact with outside world to keep them pure, right?
Mm,
But in reality, yeah, I mean, not only colonial era that really construct the way we understand, imagine indigeneity, but Orba too. I mean, Orba, um,
yes.
those times, regime, like they divide between masyarakat adat and then yang kota, gitu. And then people who live in cities. And, uh, co- like subconsciously, it makes us think that we are not indigenous per se. So we
Mhm.
always think that the indigenous people, is those who live isolated in the forest. No, it's not. We are indigenous. I mean, um where do you think our tradition of salim, of kissing other people's hand, comes? Is it from Islam? Is it from Hindu? Yeah, I can argue that if you go to India, where Indic culture originated from, or you go to Arab, where Islamic culture originated from, historically saying, there's no such thing as kissing other people's hand that older than you. So
Yeah,
it's,
as a sign of respect, right?
yeah, yeah, the way we respect each other. So there is this unwritten rules, regulation, that built our tradition, brick by brick. Yeah. Um, it's 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 indigenous mind if we refer to Osman terminology on indigeneity. We're all indigenous people, and the way we practice it, and yeah, it what makes us local. And if there's yeah, yeah, and this foreign influence, yeah, it doesn't really change. Um, you know, it's not alternate indigenous, but it's the same with, people nowadays um adopt music from United States. I mean, hipdut, it doesn't make hipdut kills.
Hipnot.
Yeah, it doesn't make hipdut kills dangdut just because it makes um what we call, like, it makes hip hop, I don't know, like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
I get what
I'm
you
not
I get
very
what
good
you're
at
yeah,
music.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not pure anymore. So it's the nature of culture. It's always in constant dialogue between,
Yes.
different
Yeah.
ideas. And yeah, I think
If
that's it.
people are interested to know more about how indigeneity actually changes throughout the regime, our own Christina made a session about it a few weeks ago. We have it on our website up, the recording. I think hopefully Nathan already uploaded it. But it's called Indigeneity in Indonesia: Histories, Translation, and Political Lives. We did it in October, back in October. So if you guys are interested to know more about that, you can like watch our session and see about it. There's also somebody who wants to give the response question. Dina, the
Yeah.
floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. This has been a really amazing discussion. So I'm Dina. I'm a journalist, so I'm not a historian or academics, but I'm really into the history of science, and I really like, the ideas that has been delivered by Alsya and also Auf. So I think I really like the statement of Aus that says that Islam itself is a grammar and the indigenous peoples are the storytellers. I think that's really bold. And I see that both of you says that you reject this kind of, it's implied that you reject the words dominations, conquered as, it's part of this decolonizing the history of Islam and also the interaction of Islam and indigenous knowledge or wisdom. But I think my question is that it seems to me that when you mention ketika lima and ketika tujuh, it seems that you are mentioning something in the realm of knowledge, that it's epistemological. But what about these physical events that did happen in the history? For example, the deforestation of the eastern coast of Sumatra. And, when the Bataknis people changed, their beliefs into Christianity, or maybe the southern part into Islam, it the physical change did happen, and there was invasion and there was conversion. I'm asking this because lately, when I talk about Islamic environmentalisms, I talk about the values, I talk about the ayat in the Quran and everything, but there's this book from Faiza Zakaria about the elephant and the camphor tree, which talk about the interaction between Islam, indigenous people, and also the Sumatran rainforest. And she argued that this Islam and also Christianity, represented by the colonial government, and also Islam represented by the Minangkabau's populations further south, it seems that Islam itself is also political. And that's kind of thing makes me thinking that, the idea of maybe this Abrahamic religion, Islam and Christianity. So this in this moment, I mean, um, Islam as a political force also at the same side with the colonial power which was Christian. And seems to me that, this Abrahamic religions try to detach people from the sacredness of the forest, that there's been no sacred forest anymore because all the trees, maybe they are not inhabited, like maybe they are just non-living things. So I think I'm curious to hear from both of you about this kind of Islam as a political power in the history of Indonesia, and that maybe Islam itself is not part of, as maybe what Al said, like it's fluid, it's interacted with the indigeneity of the people. But in this case of, deforestation and also conquered of this people in Sumatra, specifically in the Batak, do you think that the Islam as a political thing is also something that's, separated from the indigeneity, or maybe it's only about the narrative itself? So I'm curious to hear all of you, because I'm interested to write a story about it. And I think your perspectives would be great to give me insights on how to present the story itself, especially Islam. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's my.
Thank you so much for your questions and for your response. We actually discussed this, me and Auf. We were talking about how in the New Order, there's only six official religion that is recognized by the state, right? And then if I think it was over. If you're interested, you should look up Project Multatuli. They made an article, I think it was 2024, 2023, I forgot, that talks about that were interviewing people of indigenous belief who were forcibly had to convert their religion on KTP, their state ID, to fit into the narrative of the sixth religion because they only have to be, what is it called? Sistem kepercayaan. Like what was it in English of? Like system kepercayaan. So they're not recognized as a
Belief
religion.
system
Belief system. They're only recognized as a belief
or
system,
folk
right?
beliefs.
Like folk beliefs. Like it's very interesting how you were saying about Sumatra and the deforestation that happened and how you were citing Quran. We all know, like in the Quran, it's specifically stated to not harm the environment, right? To not harm God's earth. But if you look at how our two biggest Muslim organization of today having mining concessions, for example, mining contracts with said, I don't know how much I could say, but you're absolutely correct. It is a political force that is being used and weaponized, right? Like I was saying, who benefits from all of this categorization? It's also interesting. Wait, I feel like I should like stop the recording. Let me pause the recording.
A very engaging discussion. And I would love to share a few of my personal experience, especially with facing indigeneity, and Islamic perception in my daily life. Firstly, I'm not a Muslim. I'm a Christian, but I have a lot of Muslim friends. I go to Muslim conventions sometimes with ANU, sometimes with Muhammadiyah. I have also uh, present in interfaith discussion as a Catholic. So I want first to give my response to Gab about how indigeneity and Islam can exist and how their value can help us, even in their mysticism, can help us to be more efficient, especially in environmental advocation. I'm based in Cirebon, and in Cirebon there have been massive industrialization, and one of our concern is when we lost almost around 50 hectare of Bukit Kapur which is mined by the national Indosman, which is owned by the state, and it have ruined a lot of uh, people's life, and they have been displaced around uh, five villages or around sekitar satu kecamatan itu they have been displaced and relocated to other places. And what we see and what we feel about selama 3 tahun asistensi, that we are much more effective while when we are using indigenous or perhaps some kind of mysticism in order to gain support from the locals. Because of why? And around the Bukit Kapur, there's have been a lot of cave. And as Gep have said, sometimes prominent Muslim teacher or perhaps indigenous character or local character, they go into the cave and they meditate, and it become a monument. Sometimes people go from afar, from Banten, from or other places to go to that places specifically just to meditate, pray, or give apa sesajen. How do you say it in
Penghormatan,
English?
penghormatan,
Yes,
respect,
give
almost
respect,
pay the
give
respect.
respect, and give gift to that place. And it have been a good point for us because the last point of Netmo Cave is exactly inside the industrial center. It almost Bukit Kapur di sekitar gua itu semuanya sudah rata dengan tanah. Dan that cave is our only access for us local people to get inside and actually see how destructive and motivate local to protest against environment against the mining and we try to stop it. Okay, and that's my response on how indigeneity and Islam can help our effort in environmental advocacy. And I have a few questions since for Mas Auf and Kak Alsya. Uh, I experienced a lot of especially this discussion with a lot of my friends, whether they are Sunni, Muhammadiyah, NU, Ahmadiyah, LDI, and even further variation of Islam in Indonesia. It often come to petty bickering. There's not a lot of theological difference between them, but that discussion about authenticity, about which is right, I agree with you that it is a very colonial spectacle to look into the variation of Islam in Indonesia, because I believe they can do whatever they want. It's a religion, it's a private matter, and the danger for us is not on the horizontal level, but I think what is most dangerous for us is on the vertical level. How we, as variation of Muslim, how we should engage with each other without making a lot of horizontal conflict, and how this power structure or spectacle is being used by colonial powers. In this case, is just basically the government, because the government always use their colonial spectacle on us, on how they divide us. Because I'm also a very avid post-colonial reader, and I'm interested in some of you. As I'm sorry, I'm getting off track. One of NU scholars, which is Pak Ahmad Baso, uh, and in his books Islam Pasca Kolonial, it's very gamblang, sangat gamblang ketika I'm sorry, I will try to switch to
Blunt.
Indonesia because yeah, it's very blunt. When even the colonial government and their pattern to keep us divided, to keep Muslims bickering over the authenticity, and how a lot of not Muslim, a lot of religion organization such as NU, Muhammadiyah, Sheikh, or Gus in Jawa. Gus is being used as a political pion, as a political tool, and the question basically boils down to how do we, as a person in our daily life, how do we maintain a good interaction and try not to memperlihatkan or at least memperbesar the difference between a lot of variation of Islam, and also how do we, both as Muslim and as a citizen, struggle against this power structure, against the government colonial lens who is always dividing us. Because as Alsya said, if anything, at the end, who will benefit from this? And what I think the most apparent in today's because we currently live in a very oligarchic state, which is owned by the president and his crony. How do we fight this economic, especially economic colonial powers, in our daily life? Because I truly think that's a bit hard without sacrificing economic advancement and so on. Yeah, I think I'm sorry if I'm stuttering a lot and have a lot of
So good. You're
unclearness
so
in my
good.
speech. Thank you.
You're so good. Thank you so much for your response. So, wait. So, Kata, Gap, sama Kevin, right? For Kata, as you can see just from the responses that ignites this discussion, there is the tension here, both from the ordinary people on the ground and both on a state level, right? There's a very ten there's it's very apparent nowadays, and actually like it's actually the topic of my MA thesis. This whole moderate Islam, and especially what Kevin was mentioning about, you were mentioning very specifically Gus, but the case studies I use in my own thesis is about Habib, how Habibs use their own their legitimacy and credibility to kind of like move in Indonesian politics, right? So that like this topic is very much very near and dear to my heart, especially because I just submitted my thesis, so it's very fresh in my head. So to answer Kata question, yes, the tension is very apparent. There's mm, clashes, I guess. There's always clashes, friction against these two groups. And what's interesting was what Kevin was saying about how sometimes they're not. I agree with what you said because sometimes it's a question of faith almost, right? All of these horizontal conflicts. It's not more about theology, about Sunni versus Shia, for example, even though Shia is prosecuted and prejudiced heavily against in Indonesia, but we don't see them very apparent in Indonesian society. A majority of people, both NU and Muhammadi, are Sunni, by the way. So, like, it's the same. Both of them are Sunnis, but it's always a question who is kafir, who is mushrik, right? Because then it became a question of your own faith and are you sinning in the eyes of God? And if people have to encounter those type of questions in their daily life, they get very, very defensive about it. Nobody wants to be accused of sinning. Nobody wants to be accused of being a kafir or a mushrik if you're a Muslim, right? You
An
want to believe that
infidel,
you're doing the best that you can. An infidel, like
blasphemy,
apa? Yeah, apa namanya? Takafur or something
takfir,
like that, right?
takfir.
Takfir. you
Uh,
don't you don't want to be accused of being like that. So I'm in the position of I'm very much are like Auf in the sense like I don't agree with this type of purification process a lot of reformists came reformists are doing, but I also don't agree with this type of villainization of the Arabs in this discourse of Indonesian Muslim versus Islam in the Middle East, Arab Islam, whatever they want to call it, right? So I think what we can do as people is just I disagree a little bit what you said about it's not very much vertical because it is very much vertical in the sense that the type of propaganda and news outlets and the type of content that is being produced consciously by the state is also take a big part in how there is a horizontal conflict, right? Demo 212, the whole thing with Ahok. Like it wouldn't blow up the way it is if there isn't underlying system that try to kind of prop it up, right? Because it's like how you mobilize people, it's always with this information and this type of so the type of horizontal conflict, yes. The thing is I don't think you can reduce all of this to an individual level because there are things bigger than us that are in motion right now, and you just have to be conscious about it, and you have to like not to like prop up my own thesis. I was using Foucault to analyze this, right? He has this theory of there's a grid of intelligibility. Heh, I don't know how to say English. Grid of intelligibility. So basically, it's a grid which everything passes through it. language, information, knowledge, and this grid is what is being used by the state right now to kind of like who is the good one, who is the bad one, who is whatever, whatever, right? Like for the Habibs, like they're using it to kind of like who is the good Habib and who is the bad Habib in the eyes of the Indonesian societies. And if you're good, you can be in Indonesian politics. If you're bad, you got kicked out of Indonesian politics, basically. So I dis like it's very I think it's hard on us to kind of reduce it on an individual level. While at the same time, how are you gonna if the type of news outlets, news headlines, the type of things we hear on social media that is being produced by these vertical systems of power are the way it is, can you kind of blame the people on a horizontal level? Yes, so it's just like I think we as people have to be more conscious of there are things bigger than us. And yeah, so maybe I can say something. But
Yeah. I
you
agree with the conscious point. I mean, I mean, this kind of, like spread the awareness about this deep-rooted colonial legacy that we still inherit right now is a small step to for the change, right? And talking about the vertical conflicts, yeah, it's always vertical conflict. I mean, if the state, if the government really care about religious coexistence, i- every year there are a lot of excommunication, expulsion, of Christian community, like their church being banned or whatever it is by, by the purist, by Islamic purists. Where the government? They never, you know, they never show up for this kind of problem. But if the problem is like, yeah, I know, like Islam Nusantara is really a great tool for power. I mean, since all of the opposition in in for their rule are jihadists, or even though they are not jihadists or whatsoever, it's they only have this slight similarity in their own ideology. They try to they try to excommunicate them too. So yeah, I mean, so the it's always a vertical, vertical conflict, and this vertical conflict, it's covered up as if it's a horizontal conflict. So it's pretty much colonial. I mean, the way colonial wants to clean their hand from like slavery or exploitation of workers, for example in Delhi, right? There's a lot of severe um what exploitation of workers, of coolie contract in Delhi, North Sumatra, during the colonial era. And even though the workers are Javanese, which is they use other people, other ethnic, in the sense is ethnic Chinese as you know as the mandor, as the how to say this, like um the senior of the yeah, something like
Field
that.
supervisor.
Yeah, like the supervisor of the project of the construction, or construction, no, plantation. So people would blame this minority to the extreme of their vulnerability. So, this playbook still used by today's government. So, yeah,
just
the
under a different name, right?
yeah, just different name, different institution, constitution, blah blah blah. So yeah, spread this kind of awareness to the colonial, our own mind, our own history, and yeah, other things is the way to make a change. If you ask for a solution, yeah, because yeah, I'm not a policymakers. We are not policymakers. By the way, thanks to Kata for yeah, sharing the project from Louis Buana. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, shout out. And then yeah, since three of you, yeah, Gap and Kevin also asking about um conservationalism in environmental in environment. I
Mm.
mean, if the question is, does indigenous knowledge can save the planet? I mean, it support conventionalism of nature. Yes, absolutely. Yes, that's the answer. I mean, if we look into our where yeah, into the where is it? Into the table here. Yeah, the ketika lima table. It says that if you want to succeed in agriculture, which is also uh an example of harnessing our own nature for social goods, um they 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 divide it into certain days, so they make it balance make a balance between you know confer conservation and exploitation. So yeah, my answer is yes, of course. If that's why in the opening of my presentation, I said that this knowledge is not necessarily superstitious. In outside, in a glimpse, we see it as a superstition, but it's not actually. It is temporal ethics. So it's about discipline. Divide activities into certain schedule, so the nature still balance, in a sense. So I mean, like, if you want to do agriculture, you won't do at least in a week. You won't do it 7 times, right? You won't do it in kala times, or you won't do it in times that is neutral, or it doesn't have uh um good result or
Not
bad
at
result.
the time.
Yeah. So it's about discipline, it's about temporal ethics. So we talk about ethics here, and modern people, quote unquote secular society, have lost their mind because they don't afraid of things. Yeah, they don't believe in anything, they only believe in money. They worship it. So
Capitalism.
yeah. I mean, yeah, setan capital, if we refer to
Yeah. Let's not
um
let's not forget that Islam inherently is anti-capitalist, guys. Let's not forget
anti-capitalism. Yeah,
that.
pretty much we are aligned with C. Okay, so that's
Okay,
it.
stop. I need to stop the recording if you're gonna talk about this. Anyway,
Okay.
um, oh, we're almost out of time because like we usually do 1 to 1.5 hours of like something and then 30 minutes of discussion. So we only have 1 more minute. But thank you everybody for your responses, your questions, your participation in this discussions. I mean, I hope it's helpful and I hope that that you guys got something out of it. Like it's I mean, we're so pumped about this. Uh, um, housekeeping. We still have, I think we're planning on ending this model at the end of January. So we still have 3 more sessions on the indigenous on the indigenous module. And then after that, we're gonna go right back into Islam again in the third module, and probably Auf is also gonna guest star in some of it because we're gonna talk about the ideas that came when we first started talking about Indonesia as a nation and all of the foreign quote unquote ideas that came with it. And we have to talk about Islam, one of the biggest influence in how the Indonesian society is built and even conceptualized its national identity. That and Marxism. So, like, be excited about that, guys. We're probably gonna start in like February or something for that, but we're gonna finish the module, inshallah, in at the end of January. So thank you, everybody. A big applause for Alf for coming into Deconstructing Indonesia and sharing your research. And thank you for everybody for tuning in. People in America, it's late. It's like 10 p.m. While people in Indonesia on a Friday, wah, Jumat berkah banget ya. Jum'ah Mubarak, Jum'ah berkah, Masya Allah, Tabarakallah. Bener banget.
Yeah. Thank you to Alsya and the Constructing Indonesia team. Such a great discussion, and everyone who attend this discussion, or yeah, impressive. I don't have any other word, Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
great time to talk with you guys.
Thank you, everybody. I'm gonna stop the session and the recording now.